Tighten your lines as we get ready to sail the seven seas on the Political Pirate Podcast. Join Captain Ted Yoho and the salty dog John Martin as they search far and wide for the greatest treasure of all, the truth. From local Florida news to nationwide stories and the globe beyond, we've got it all mapped out. Now here's your hosts, the salty dog John Martin and Captain Ted Yoho.
Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the 3 Ps, the Political Pirate Podcast, coming to you live from Spurrier's Gridiron Grill in beautiful Gainesville, Florida, the home of the Florida Gators, if you will. And man, it's great to be here.
Great to be a Florida Gator.
Absolutely, great to be in Florida when you look at some of the weather that's happening other places.
Really.
Well, Ted, there's not much to talk about these days.
I don't think we should do a program today.
I wonder if we're going to run out of ideas.
Yeah. As long as President Trump's around, we're going to have plenty to talk about.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, everybody's probably seen all kind of coverage, but if you're just waking up, you've been under a rock somewhere. Donald Trump went in with our military, incredibly successful. We'll get into the pros and cons of it in a minute, but the actual operation was literally flawless. And thank God, I'm talking about going in and capturing Maduro and his wife with a minimal casualty, as far as we did have a couple of soldiers that were wounded. Apparently they're doing well. We had one piece of equipment, apparently a helicopter that was damaged, but it flew back, and we got Maduro and his wife out unharmed, and it doesn't sound like there were a lot of casualties within whatever apparatus was happening in Venezuela itself. So before we get into some specifics, Ted, what are your general thoughts about what has transpired over the weekend?
Well, let's start off with Happy New Year, everybody. Glad to see everybody here, and we're happy to be here. I think I think what we're seeing, and we've talked about this before, John, is this is a prelude to World War III. And I say that because people are questioning, should we have gone in there, or should we left it alone? Should we negotiate it or diplomatically try to get Maduro to change ways? That's been tried for several years. He came in after Chavez, and Chavez was the leader that turned Venezuela from a very successful Latin American country, very wealthy country, to a socialist nightmare. And so this has been going on. And I say this is a prelude to World War III because we see all the other stuff going on around the world. We see what China is doing. China is embedded in Venezuela. Cuba is embedded in Venezuela, along with Iran and Russia. And so they're building up forces in the Western Hemisphere. And with everything else that's going on, that we know that China's ultimate goal is to be the world hegemon. I bring all that up to say, when do you wait? At what point do you say, we should have done that? And this is the thing about a strong leader, a good leader. They're going to make a decision, and they're going to move on that. And I think that's what we saw with President Trump and his team. As you pointed out, they executed this flawlessly. And as I go back and forth to D.C. once a month, we had met with some people from the administration, and we talked about the buildup of military assets in the Caribbean, and now we know why it was there. And the message is stay out of the Western Hemisphere. Trump came out with their strategy for national security, and it was saying that we're going to pivot to the Western Hemisphere to keep the communism out of it.
Well, they're now calling it the Donroe Doctrine, right? Like the Monroe Doctrine, the President Trump Doctrine, which, really, if you look at what President Monroe did in those days, who does not get near enough credit, by the way,
right.
But as former presidents or past presidents need to get, but we do need to control our hemisphere, and it's as important now as it's ever been.
Well, it is, and then you got to weigh stuff, because China says the same thing, that they've got too much Western influence in the Chinese Sea, the South China Sea, and they're going to use this against us. But what China has been doing is they've been marching through and intimidating nations all through the Asia Pacific region, and they're coming over here, and about 85% of that oil, if I understand, from Venezuela goes to China. So this is going to be a concern for China, because if you look at World War II, one of the things that brought Japan into a war with us is we started doing blockades of oil going to their country, and they were energy deprived. And I can see China doing the same thing. Keep in mind, China has been building up their military for the last 10 years. Not just electronic warfare, the missiles, the hypersonic weapons. They're building a naval fleet that just launched, the largest one in the world. And they've got 4 more that are nearing completion. And they've got F-35s exactly like ours. So it tells you there's espionage and they're stealing all this stuff. So they're preparing for war. And they're marching towards that. And at some point, we've got to be the ones that say, you know what, you're not coming into this hemisphere, and keep them over in the Asia-Pacific region.
Well, since you brought up China, I was talking to a friend of mine over the weekend that spent a lot of time in China in his career, working, doing various things, working for a big engineering company and everything else, and spent a lot of time over in that part of the world and still has a lot of contacts there. And the average Chinese person, you know, the business type person, they're pretty worried right now about what's actually happening in China, because economically China is struggling quite a bit. We don't really hear a lot about that, but they are struggling quite a bit, and desperate people tend to do desperate things.
They really do. And if you look at world history, when countries get backed into a corner financially, on trade, other issues, and you look at their economy is failing. It's talked about how they just had a 5% GDP in the last year, but I think this is all propaganda. You have riots over there going all the time, protests going on all the time. They have a high youth unemployment, and then they have an aging workforce worse than ours because of their one-child policy. And so all these things are adding up, and they have a lot of problems over there. The other thing, China has invested in 340 projects around the world through their Belt and Road Initiative, which is a form of foreign assistance, but they use predatory lending practices in that. And they use that to take over projects that they start that are strategic, like deep water ports where they can put their Navy ships in. And they've done this in over 149 countries around the world. And the problem they're having is these countries are poor countries and they can't pay them back. So that's putting more financial strain on the Chinese economy, and it's putting strain on Xi Jinping remaining the leader of China.
Well, and I never hear this report in the news, but I know because I have a lot of connections in the Bahamas. My wife is a Bahamian and American citizen, but China's literally on our doorstep. I mean, they're trying to do a lot of things in the Bahamas. They were doing a lot, and now they've met with some resistance over there. But you don't get any closer to the United States than the Bahamas.
That and Cuba. I mean, they 90 miles off Miami and Key West there. China's down there, and they just signed a Belt and Road Initiative, which is their form of going in and doing infrastructure projects, but China's goal is to do a deep water port there. And they want to extract oil out from there 90 miles away from us, which is not a good thing. And so here they are in our own backyard. They're in Jamaica. They're all over the Caribbean. And they're spreading their tentacles. And it's not just them lending money. It's bringing Chinese thought and philosophy. And when China comes to a country, they bring in their workers. They have to use Chinese contractors, and they'll ship material from China all the way over to these countries to use that, and they grow a Chinese economy within those countries, and that's why you're seeing people push back into Bahamas. They've done this all over Africa. They did it in Panama. They've got a Chinese culture in all these countries they go, and the local population is resisting this, and it's really pushing back, which is a good thing for us because they've gained influence in Latin and South America with the majority of the countries, and we've lost it. The other thing they do, John, is they're using coercion to get countries to drop diplomatic ties with Taiwan, and that's going to help them reclaim Taiwan, because everybody will say they're an independent, they're a wayward child of China, and so they want to reclaim it.
Absolutely. Well, let's get into a little bit more about maybe what's going to be next in because I mean we can't really predict, but what's happening in Venezuela, because I don't think there's really any debate about the success of the initial what happened with Maduro. Even some ardent far leftists have had to grudgingly admit that. So I think the bigger question, and it is a legitimate question, what is next? But before we do that, I got to tell you that my favorite video so far in 2026, which is only like a week old, is this next video. And this is Maduro and his wife, I think they're in separate choppers, flying by the Statue of Liberty on their way to be incarcerated.
Do you think that was intentional?
I got a feeling it just might be, or maybe it's just a coincidence. But let's play that.
Do we know if Trump was in the window looking out, waving to him?
He was probably up on the Statue of Liberty doing the dance. He's up there on the torch going like that. Man, that's what he should have been. But let's play this, and we'll come back and talk about it, because this is my favorite.
We'll see in a second there. Statue of Liberty off to the right side. That's our light flashing in front of us. As a matter of fact, it looks like they're going to take a flight by the Statue of Liberty with the Venezuelan president. You see them going right by Lady Liberty.
I love it when the newscaster, whoever's talking there, talks about they're going to fly. Oh, they're going to fly right by, and you can see that the helicopter's literally diverted to get a better view, almost like a tour. Like, check out, that's where you are.
Welcome to America.
I mean, and Ted, you mentioned while we were watching that about what was Trump doing. I said I'd love to see him up on the torch of the Statue of Liberty doing like this. How you like me now?
It is funny how Maduro was poking fun at Trump, and he was doing the Trump dance. And I wonder if Trump showed up at their detention cell and was outside it doing the dance, like, who's laughing now?
Yeah, well, I tell you, if you watched down in Florida and some up in New York, where they're probably the highest concentration of Venezuelan people living in the States, Florida's got a lot, they were celebrating.
They were.
I mean, they really were celebrating. And the only people that I saw protesting the other way, I hate to say it, were old white folks.
And Democrats.
But that goes without saying. But old white folks that look like me, but are out there going, free Maduro.
You're not old, John. You're so hard on yourself.
It's just crazy.
It's interesting. I called some friends of mine that are Venezuelan, and they were telling me the situation over the last 15 years, how if you own two houses, and since Chavez took over and then Maduro, if you weren't occupying a house, the government would come in, take that house over, and put people in there. And so you lost your property rights. And, that has been going on. And so the people I spoke to said that the word on the street that they got from Venezuela is the military pretty much just backed down and let this happen. And keep in mind, Maduro, he has for security forces Cuban soldiers. They don't trust the Venezuelans enough to have them as their personal security, so they use the Cuban forces. The other thing is, people may not remember this, in Trump's first administration, they had negotiated the deal with Maduro. He was supposed to step down. The State Department was going to fly him out. On his way to the airplane, the negotiators, it all broke down, the negotiations, because Russia and Cuba says you can't leave. So he was kind of a condemned man. If he had left, they probably would have been assassinated. We don't know for sure, but we do know that Russia and Cuba prevented Maduro from leaving, because I talked to Mike Pompeo, and he said we had the deal all set up. They were getting ready to go to the airport, and they nixed it. And you heard Rubio say, we've given this guy multiple offers to leave, but he won't leave.
Yeah, he could have been on a beach somewhere, but I think Rubio said. Well, just to bring everybody kind of up to speed, because it's a fluid situation, obviously, down there, but the Supreme Court of Venezuela confirmed what this article is calling hardline socialist Vice President Delcy Rodriguez
Very
as
good.
Maduro's successor. I hope I'm saying that correctly.
You said it perfect.
Now, Ted, I've been doing, I wouldn't be surprised if you know a lot more about her than I do, but I've done a little bit of research, and she is no like freedom fighter. She's no, like pro-democracy, pro-republic person. She's a hard-line socialist.
She is.
Her and her brother both, and apparently their father was pretty ruthless, and basically she was propped up by Maduro, and their family propped him up conjointly. So there are certainly questions about that. What are your thoughts of her being in charge right now?
Well, somebody like her to be in charge in the position she is, they've got to be ruthless. That's a tough environment. It's not like you go to your voters and, you get voted in by the majority in your district. It's the heavy hand of authoritarianism. And, so it's going to be interesting to see what merges out of this. The thing we don't want to do is be like Iraq, where President Bush goes in there, we take out Saddam Hussein, who was a bad actor, and he wanted to give freedom to the Iraqi people. They don't know what freedom is. I mean, they've been run by a dictator for so long, they never knew anything like this. And so it's going to be interesting. And of course, we saw what happened after that. Al-Qaeda came out of that. And then we were in a war for 20 years. We don't want that to happen. And the Obama administration did the same thing in Libya when they took out their air defense systems. They call it the no-fly zones. And they didn't have a strategy. And Robert, he was a defense secretary. It'll come back to me. He said that they had no plan, and Hillary and Obama said, well, we're going to do this and sit back and see what happens. Well,
Gates?
Yeah, Robert Gates. Thank you. You sparked a memory in me.
That's why we work so good together. That's what a first mate is supposed to do.
That's right. Anyways, they said that they had no plan, and after they took the no-fly zone down, they stepped back, and you know what came out of that, right? It was ISIS. And so we don't want that to happen here. I can only think that with Rubio and the people that Trump has there, they have a strategic plan, and I'm sure it's gone on the ground in Venezuela for months before they acted.
Well, a lot of people have tried to compare over there what might happen to like Iraq and stuff like that. And I can understand at first blush why they would do that. But I would bring up something that I think is very key difference. And that is the culture of Venezuela. Right. It's not, they're basically a Catholic country. Mm-hmm. There's no real faction of fanaticism religious like there is there that are literally blood enemies against each other and that type of thing. I think the bigger danger is not to break up like Iraq, but if they don't have firm control, they could break up into kind of warlords, if you will, that are centered around drugs and illicit
the drug
stuff,
warlords.
That type of thing. I think that's a greater danger than having like ISIS and the Sunnis versus the Shiites and all that. It's not really the same situation.
Well, it's not, and that's a good point, because if you look at Venezuela, they're a very democratic country. They had their liberties and freedoms. I was down there, I fished, and it was just a beautiful country. And so they had that back in the 2000s, early 2000s. I can't remember when Chavez came in. But they had that liberty and freedom, so they know that. They have a taste of that, and it's hard to take that away from somebody. So I can only think the Venezuelan people will rise to the occasion and do the right thing and form a stable government that's aligned with the United States values and, like you said, the Christian values. And keep in mind, there's been over 2 million people that have left Venezuela, and they're spread all over Latin America. A lot of them are in Colombia, and the Colombians would help them get back as they cause a lot of crime over there because there's no jobs for them. So this is a call to action for the Venezuelans that have been that have left the country of Venezuela and gone elsewhere for a safe haven, this is the time to rise to power and bring in a stable government.
Yeah, well, President Trump said of Ms. Rodriguez, who is now I guess, the acting president of Venezuela. Certainly that could change before our show is over. You never know. But he said of her, she, I think, was quite gracious, but she really doesn't have a choice. An interesting way to put it. He went on to say she's essentially willing to do what we think is necessary to make Venezuela great again. Very simple. So I read into that he's saying that she wants to survive, and she doesn't want to end up being choppered by the Statue of Liberty. And so she's going to kind of do what we're telling her to do. What do you think about that?
Well, like you said, I think we're going to have to just wait and see how this pans out. She doesn't have a choice right now. So, let's see her get in there and see what she does. And you're going to be able to tell a lot by what the Venezuelan people do. And if they come out in mass and support what's going on, this is going to be a good thing. If they're intimidated and the military represses them and really stomps down on them, anytime you see a protest against a authoritarian government, if the government intimidates the people and they back down, you're going to have a long drawn out affair.
Yeah, and of course, a lot of people are turning to this lady, Maria Corina Machado, that won the Nobel Prize and was essentially elected president, but then she wasn't allowed to be on the ballot and ran as vice president, and they won and all of that, that she should be immediately put in there. I have not really heard her call for that, and I would caution people about that because I think that it might be dangerous for her to do that, because what we don't want to do is have something happen to her if she first gets in there. So I think that if they can stabilize it a little bit, and then she can maybe they have free and fair elections and run again and that kind of thing. I think just to inject her in the middle of this is probably would not be the best choice.
Well, again, it's going to be the sentiment of the people in the country. If they embrace her and they felt that she won a legitimate election, which it looks like she did. Trump, I don't have the information they do, obviously, and he said she just doesn't have the support. And so let's let this play out. Keep in mind, in Trump's first term, they had elections, and Juan Guaido won that presidential election, and we as the United States recognized him as the president of Venezuela. In fact, Trump had him at the State of the Union, and he stood up. Members of Congress, we all said he was a legitimate president, and he may come back on the scene also.
Yeah, and the thing is, Trump's getting criticized by talking about rebuilding the oil industry. And, of course, he said that the oil companies are coming back and they're going to pay for the infrastructure of it and then maybe get reimbursed down the line. But the thing is, people need to keep in mind that Trump is all about economics and business. And the best thing they could do is get their economy going, because people tend to forget that I remember when Maduro first really took over and created chaos, the Venezuelan people were eating zoo animals, let alone garbage too, and that kind of thing. So if he can pump some money back into the system, that is going to bring peace to people, because people, if they're starving and desperate, they do desperate things. So
Absolutely.
I think he's right on track there with that.
Well, if you don't have economic security, you don't have national security. And, they've got the oil there. They've got the resources. The oil companies want to go there. Chevron is still down there. And Trump says, we're going to help them rebuild that. And he goes, we're going to pay for it. But I know what he talked about, too, was they're going to be reimbursed by the oil revenues. And he said China is a big partner of theirs. We're going to make sure they get their oil. That's going to be a big concern for China, because they take 80% of that oil. The other thing that really, it was something that really needed to be done, is we've had sanctions on all these countries like Russia and Iran, and they had these shadow fleets that were bringing oil from Iran to other parts of the world and then restocking in Venezuela, and we had sanctions against Venezuela, and they're taking this on the black market. They're transferring this oil on the open seas, and so there was a lot of this nefarious stuff that kept money going to the regimes of Iran, to the Venezuelan government, and to Russia. And we always throw these sanctions around, but we never enforce them. This is the enforcement that has been needed to happen for the last 20 years, and we'll see how this plays out. But it is a new sheriff in town, and when he says something, as Rubio says, he means it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about some other ramifications both in the area and potentially around the world. Take us to break, Ted.
No, we look forward to carrying this story on. No telling what's going to happen between now and then. We may have a new headline.
Absolutely.
See you after the break.
Although the owner of Lewis Oil Company maintains she is 29, Lewis Oil turns 60 years old in June. Chevron would like to recognize the North Florida second-generation family-owned business, celebrating its growth and staying power. Lewis Oil Company maintains significant on-hand supplies, strategically located fuel depots, a delivery fleet, on-site service, fuel card locks, and convenience stores. Lewis Oil Company understands its responsibility in the local economy by providing service and delivery on demand and in crisis. As a first responder for 18 Florida counties and the Southeast from Texas to Virginia, we are proud of this rare accomplishment. Lewis Oil delivers.
This is Ward Scott, and I want to thank all our sponsors who keep the show going and pay the bills. The Ward Scott Files premium sponsors are Crime Prevention Security Systems, large enough to serve you, small enough to care.
Meldon Law, the only official injury partner of the Florida Gators.
The Ward Scott Files Gold sponsors are Lewis Oil Company,
Shoot GTR,
On the Spot Dry Cleaners, R&R Construction, and Style Cuts. If you are interested in promoting your business on the show, you can visit our website, www.wardscottfiles.com, and click on the Advertise Here banner on the right side of the page, or call my friend Freddie at 352-284-3733. Again, thank you to all the great businesses that support the Ward Scott Files. And remember, if you like the show, thank our sponsors and support the businesses that support us.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. May God have mercy on your soul.
Or that very much surprises me that you've never been tased.
You can't handle the truth.
All bees poop.
A warthog. He's going to come up the steps. Here he comes. Oh my goodness, and he's huge. Hello, boy. I wonder if we can pet him. Hi, boy.
Can we touch him? No, don't.
Help me! Help! Help!
Well, we're back to the 3 Ps, the Political Pirate podcast here in Spurrier's Gridiron Grill at Celebration Point. Well, Ted, we always come back from break with the old warthog there, a tribute to our good buddy Ward Scott. And it might actually be safe for a warthog to go into Venezuela now, because before they'd probably gotten eaten.
We'll have to ask the warthog. I don't know if we can get a passport to go down there.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, the question kind of comes up next. Where will the next domino, so to speak, fall? What happens with the Donroe Doctrine, our hemisphere? Trump even mentioned about, what could be next and all that kind of stuff. And Marco Rubio was asked about Cuba. And of course, Rubio, first of all, let me just say, Marco Rubio has done an incredible job.
He really has.
Secretary of State. I when he first got appointed, I was like, I don't know, but he's been fantastic.
No, he has. And, he's Cuban descent, and, he's very passionate about Cuba, as all the Florida delegates that are. We've got 3 of them, strong Cuban, I don't want to say nationalists, but supporters of a free Cuba. And Marco, he was very succinct in this. And again, when I met with the people up in the administration a couple months ago, they said Cuba was next to fall. So we're going to see if it happens organically, or we're going to be flying people out.
Let's play this video of Rubio being asked about Cuba during the press conference at Mar-a-Lago after the action in Venezuela. Check this out. I think you'll find it entertaining.
You should take him seriously. Suffice it to say, Cuba is a disaster. It's run by incompetent, senile men, and in some cases, not senile, but incompetent nonetheless. It has no economy. It's in total collapse. And by the way, they were, all of the guards that helped protect Maduro, this is well known, their whole spy agency, all that were full of Cubans. I mean, it's amazing. This poor island took over Venezuela in some cases. One of the biggest problems the Venezuelans have is they have to declare independence from Cuba that tried to basically colonize it from a security standpoint. So, yeah, look, if I lived in Havana and I was in the government, I'd be concerned, at least a little bit.
Cutting off the oil flow to Cuba from Venezuela?
I mean, I love the part where he says, Ted, about, the Cuban people, they don't have nothing to worry about. But if you're a politician living in Havana, maybe you should be worried.
I think you're going to see that fall next. And it's, that's something that we've lived with all of our lives. I remember, my parents went down to Cuba back when it was a free country before Castro took over. And again, it's an island country, mountainous, very beautiful, very lush, very tropical. And it's been run by communists for the last, 50, 60, almost 70 years. And it is time for a change here because what they're doing is not working. Because if it was working, you wouldn't see all those Cubans coming to America. They would be building a strong Cuban nation. And I think you're going to see this flip rather quickly. They're not going to have the support. Obviously Venezuela is not going to be there to support them. And again, it goes back to Maduro didn't trust his own people enough. He had the Cuban military there, and that armed force was a big payout to the Cuban government. It kept them afloat. So they're going to lose that. They're going to lose the oil coming in, and I think it'll be a rapid change, which is a good thing. And going back to the Obama and Biden administration, they had no focus on building democracies or supporting democracies. I'm not into nation building or any of that, but I think we should support the ideals that we stand for. And Obama and Biden were 100% against that. And I remember we had John Kerry in our office or in a hearing, and I brought up, what about the Monroe Doctrine? He goes, oh, that's outdated. That didn't do anything. We don't believe in that anymore, and we're getting away from that. And I'm like, how in the heck can you say that? Because that was to say keep West or other nation influence out of the Western Hemisphere, and they just allowed it to happen. And that's why you've got the Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians, and no telling who else is down there. And so, yeah, it's time to re-straighten that out, and Trump is doing that.
Well, you said about how we, meaning I think Floridians like you and I are now, and of course I've been here multiple generations, that we've seen experience from Cuba and all that. And I like when you said that because it triggered, as always, something in me. That one of the things that really irritates me about the immigration that's happened and illegal immigration and all is when people on the left start accusing people like me and stuff like that. Oh, we're just opposed to brown people. We're just opposed to, Hispanic people. I know you are. And all, yeah. That's why I laugh about that. I got brown and black and every color of the rainbow grandchildren. But in Florida, we have experienced, Cubans have been here a long time. I mean, forever basically. And you'll find that the Cuban people in Florida, I'm painting with a broad brush, but you'll never find a more freedom-loving, God-fearing, respect for America and the values than the Cuban people, because they know, because of Cuba, they got so many relatives still down there, and it's literally on our doorstep. They know better than most Americans what the difference between freedom and tyranny. They know.
Oh, they know it. They know it.
And I got to believe, even though I haven't had that much experience with it, that a lot of the Hispanics that are American citizens in Texas and different places there, that's why they feel the way they do, and join the Border Patrol and all of that kind of stuff, because they know the difference. And what happened with this latest flooding is we got a lot of people that were coming here potentially for the wrong reasons and not looking to enhance and enjoy American freedom, but to exploit it.
No, you're absolutely right. And, the immigrant communities, the ones that love this nation, they assimilate, they have strong families, and you look at the Latino community, you go by a church on a Wednesday night, and that's prayer night for a lot of people that don't know. Those churches, they're packed with people. They're packed with family. You see the whole family there. Sundays, the churches are packed. It's the whole family there because they are building strong communities. And, if Venezuela becomes free and Cuba becomes free, you're going to see a migration out of America to go back to some of these countries because they want to go back to their home countries.
Yeah, and I want to play a video from Mayorkas, who was the Homeland Security under Biden. This video at the time really, and every time I watch it, it really kind of ticks me off, Ted, because it's very classic that the Democrats under Biden and Obama and that type of Democrat, they actually are the ones that are looking at people based on their political beliefs and who they vote for. Because, at the very time when we got millions of people bum rushing our southern border, Mayorkas said this specifically about Cubans and Haitians and others. Check this out.
Allow me to be clear. If you take to the sea, you will not come to the United States. The time is never right to attempt migration by sea. To those who risk their lives doing so, this risk is not worth taking. Again, I repeat, do not risk your life attempting to enter the United States illegally. You will not come to the United States.
Have it, the leading guy from the Biden administration literally saying, if you're coming here by boat, which would basically mean Cubans and Haitians, you're not welcome. You're going to be turned away. But if you're bum rushing our southern border, hands off, you can do anything you want. And that's because Cubans and to a certain extent Haitians were voting overwhelmingly for Trump and Republicans in both 2016 and 2020, and they were going to be punished for it, in my opinion.
No, I mean, that guy was toxic. I mean, the thing that irritates me, John, is they had him up for impeachment, and the Republicans blocked it. This guy was toxic to America. He was running an anti-American campaign along with Obama and Biden because Obama was eventually, ultimately in charge of this. And this was something that it's just so good that they're gone, and I hope they never come back or that mindset never comes back into government in America because it is antithetical to what we stand for. It was weakening America. And of course, the people on the left, your Bernie Sanders, your AOC, your Mamdanis, they all want to destroy this nation. And the crazy thing is they want to build it back into this utopian socialist program of Venezuela, and it's a failed state, but they want to bring that to the shores of America. Then you have people like Ilhan Omar that wants to destroy America just because she hates it. And these people, I just can't believe that they're even in power. I just saw a headline jump up. Tim Walz has backed out of the governor's race in Minnesota, so I guess that's a cause for celebration.
Maybe
and you heard it first here. You heard it first here.
He can make more money open up a daycare there.
Yeah, daycare center or learning center. Maybe you can spell it correctly.
Yeah, well, so let's move on a little bit to who else might be in the crosshairs. We were talking about Cuba. Well, another name that comes up is Iran. Now, we've been talking a little bit about what's happening. It is very chaotic in Iran right now. And President Trump did make a post on Truth Social, and this quick video we're going to play kind of alludes to that, and we'll come back and talk about it.
President Trump is threatening possible U.S. intervention as deadly protests spread across Iran. In a post on Truth Social, Trump warned the United States could step in if peaceful protesters are shot or killed. Iranian officials quickly pushed back, warning that American interference would threaten their national security. The protests come amid Iran's worsening economic crisis. People there are dealing with soaring prices and a collapsing currency. Food costs have also jumped more than 70%, fueling widespread anger toward the government.
Well, with all that's happening in Iran, and of course, Netanyahu, he came out and praised Donald Trump's actions in Venezuela. And I just had a thought about, we're getting back to Cuba real quick. Wouldn't it be something, Ted, if Maduro is convicted and gets sentenced to his time in Guantanamo Bay? That would be something. But Iran, so...
Wait a minute. Let's stop there.
Go ahead.
This is what I don't want to happen, because under Biden, the president of Honduras got convicted and he was in jail. Trump gave him a pardon. Now we've got Maduro here. If he gets convicted and goes to jail here, will the next Democrat president let him go? And stand back as a foreign nation and say, look at the Americans. They arrest somebody, another administration comes in, they let them go. They don't know what their game plan is. And, it really erodes trust around the world. And we've got to be where we're trustworthy to have strong alliances and respect from other countries. If not, we're going to go back and forth like this and continue down the road of confusion.
Yeah, I love hear what the Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei wrote on X. It's amazing that he's writing on X Sunday morning, but he said, talking about the United States, he said, we won't give in to them. With reliance on God and confidence in the people's support, we'll bring the enemy to its knees. The people's support, from what I'm seeing over there in Iran, the last thing he has right now is the people's support.
He doesn't. And, they protested under Obama. He did nothing. It was during when the green revolutions were going around the world. They protested under Biden. He didn't help them. They got squashed. Now they're protesting under Trump. The economy in Iran is terrible, and people want liberties and freedoms there just like they do everywhere else around the world. Government, like the Iranian regime, are the ones that are blocking them. And it's going to be interesting because we know it doesn't work real well in the Middle East if we intervene. But if you do, you've got to do like Trump did when he went into Iran and blew up the nuclear facilities. And it's going to be hard and fast, and it'll be a message that hopefully people will say, enough's enough. Let's toe the line and get on board.
Well, one thing about it, with the precision of our military, and of course, if you're talking about Iran, with what the Israelis have been able to do, I would be a little bit nervous because you remember when we bombed, it didn't get a whole lot of publicity, but when we took out the nuclear facilities of Iran, all of their main military leaders gathered in one place, and we literally waited till they got there, and we took them out too. And of course, Maduro was literally trying to get to his safe place, and we were sitting there waiting on him. And the Israelis, with their pagers and their cell phones and all that kind of stuff. So if you're one of the top people in Iran, you can't feel too comfortable right now.
I would think not, and I would really think, they have to be thinking of how well these incursions were executed, how fast they came about, and how successful they were. And it kind of gives pause that if I'm a person that is on our list, you may want to change the way you run your country. And I know Xi Jinping is watching this too. And, no telling what Kim Jong-un is doing, because he's got nukes, and if he's threatened, no telling what he'll do.
Absolutely.
Let's just hope it stays calm and peaceful, and that people start working together in the world, a kumbaya moment, which is not human nature, but it would be a wonderful thing, wouldn't it, to start the new year off that way.
You were mentioning about China and Russia. We're going to talk a little bit about that, because this is what the Russian Foreign Ministry put out a statement about what happened in Venezuela. So this morning, the United States carried out an act of armed aggression against Venezuela. This causes deep concern and condemnation. So our enemies this is what gets me, because China's thing is basically, I'm going to read it in a minute, but they're basically, and the Democrats are saying this as well, which is kind of interesting, that somehow we're in violation of international law. That's what they're talking about, and that's pretty rich coming from
Russia.
From Russia and China. Let me read this, and you can talk about them both, Chad. So China's foreign ministry, not to be outdone, said the hegemonic actions of the U.S. seriously violate international law, infringe upon Venezuela's sovereignty, and threaten peace and security in Latin America and the Caribbean. So that's what they're saying. Kind of sounds the same, and it's interesting that some of the Democratic leadership, I heard Schumer on a program when I was coming in, he was basically saying the same thing.
I'm sorry you had to hear him.
He was saying the same thing, Ted. Does that surprise you?
No, not at all. I mean, because they're wanting to support up, the Democrats want to support up these authoritarian figures, and they blame Trump for being an authoritarian figure. And, the Iranians, give me a break. I mean, they're hanging people today in Iran. They've stepped up their mass killings, and the way they kill them over there is they hang them from buildings and from cranes, and they've done more of that. And for Russia to come out and say it was an armed act of aggression against Venezuela, do we need to remind them of Ukraine? Give me a break. And then China, China intimidates everybody in that Asia-Pacific region. Brunei, Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, all these countries down there, they're intimidating and putting force on them, fishing in their exclusive economic zones, and they're doing that around the world. They've destroyed over 6,000 acres of coral reef to build islands that have been militarized down there, but they're saying we're the aggressors.
Violate international law. And you mentioned about Ukraine. So I thought this was an interesting comment. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky called for the United States to detain Russian President Vladimir Putin after U.S. forces captured Venezuela. So he's Maduro in Venezuela. So Zelensky is, and I guess
he's going back to his comedian side.
I was thinking the same thing. He's being a comic. Oh, well, we just need to go in there and take Putin out, So I thought that was interesting. I
wonder if Putin's worried about that because, again, the Caracas, the capital where Maduro was supposed to be the most fortified place. And it didn't work so well. And look at Iran with their military. And we went in there untouched, unnoticed on both of these. And we had 150 airplanes or military crafts flying into Venezuela at pretty much ground zero, where they weren't picked up by radar at all. And they pulled this off. It's pretty amazing. I want to see the movie.
Yeah, and so I want to get a little bit into a little closer to home, the Democrats' reaction to this, which I label as predictable. But I want to play Mandami, the new mayor in New York. He had something to say about this. But as we play this, I want people to keep in mind, this is the same guy that when campaigning said that he would support arresting Netanyahu if and when he came to New York. But this is what he said about our action in Venezuela. Check it out.
I called the president and spoke with him directly to register my opposition to this act and to make clear that it was an opposition based on being opposed to a pursuit of regime change, to the violation of federal and international law, and a desire to see that be consistent each and every day.
So this is a guy, like I said, Ted, that wants to arrest Benjamin Netanyahu, but it's illegal action to go in and execute a warrant for the arrest of Maduro. I mean, you can't have your bread and butter.
Well, and he says it's against federal law, and I'm like, you're a mayor of a city. You need to worry about your city. You don't worry about the federal. The primary goal of the American government is national security, and if we have war brewing and we know China is geared up to take over the world and we know they've got their tentacles in the Western Hemisphere, I think it's probably the right move to do. I had to kind of think through that of why we did that, and again, not knowing everything that the Trump administration knows, I'm going to put the faith in them and keep America strong. And so, Madami, you worry about your free buses in New York, and let's see how that works out for you.
Yeah, well, not to be outdone by Mandami, the DNC actually put out a fundraising email about what we did down there. And basically, you just said, here, I'm going to read two quick parts of it. Another day, another unconstitutional war for Trump, who thinks the Constitution is a suggestion. But then they go on to say that the most important thing we can do, talking about the American people, is elect more Democrats who will check this administration's power. So the solution to all the world's problems is to elect more Democrats. That's what they're saying, and they're raising money off of it.
Oh, they're going to raise money on this, John. And, you know, people's memory are so short term because of the stuff they go through every day. Just turn the pages back 4 years ago when the Obama night, Biden came in, and look at the disaster that happened in this country when the Democrats were in charge of the White House, the House, and thank God they didn't have the Senate. Look at the mayhem that happened, not just in this country, but around the world. Russia would not have gone into Ukraine had Trump been in there. This is what's coming if they get back in power. And so they're going to raise money at everything they can to try to elect these people. But we have faith in the American people. They're not going to fall for that. And that's why you're listening to this show.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the thing that I hadn't really heard too many people talk about, Ted, but we're going to on this show, is the Biden administration talking about chaos and illegal activity and whether we violate an international law. Keep this in mind, ladies and gentlemen. The Biden administration put out a $25 million bounty on Maduro's head for arrest and conviction, basically like he had robbed the local liquor store or something like that. They upped it, it was originally $15 million, but in the last few months of Biden's presidency, they upped it to $25 million. Now, you want to talk about chaos. Can you imagine if someone had actually gone in there seeking that award, had arrested Maduro, snatched him out, maybe harmed him or his wife? What kind of chaos would be happening in Venezuela right now?
It would be a disaster. It would be the same thing that Hillary Clinton and Obama did in Iraq or Libya. They took out Gaddafi or allowed Gaddafi to fall, and we got chaos and mayhem there and chaos. And it would be the same thing in Venezuela, and it would become a stronger bedrock for communism, with the help of China, Russia, and Iran.
Yeah, absolutely. So, do as I say, not what I do, I suppose. But, Ted, we only got a few minutes left. And the one thing I'd say, and I'd love to hear what your comments on this and others are, that I tell people just kind of take a deep breath right now. I'm not saying that there might not be chaos in there. I'm not even saying that ultimately what President Trump do will be a perfect solution or any of that kind of stuff. But I think we just need to have a little bit of trust and faith. Look what the military did. Have a little bit of trust and faith, a little bit of patience. The Venezuelan people seem to be pleased right now with what happened. And let's let the chips play a little bit before we just rush to thinking that the world is coming to an end.
I agree with that. I think those are wise counsel, words of wise counsel. And I think, again, we don't know the facts that Trump had. I do know they've been planning this for months, and it was very well orchestrated. It pulled off very well. And I can only think that they have plans going in there assisting the Venezuelans to get into power and run a liberal democracy, of Western ideologies. And if they can do that and support that, and if you see the Venezuelan people and their military get on board with that, you're going to see this turn out very well. And I think it'll be a model for moving into the future. And again, I'm not a nation builder. I'm not a neocon. I don't think that's the role. But I think at certain times, with the precarious situation we are with an impending World War III, actions had to be taken sooner than later. And this was definitely sooner than any of us thought. And I think, like you said, before we knee-jerk react and say how terrible this is, let's let it play out. Let's give the support, and let's put the trust in our intelligence community that we have in this administration. If this was Biden or Obama, I would be running scared.
Yeah, I would tell people this too, Ted, and we've talked about this before, and I can't believe that I'm saying this, but I'm going to say it because I would have never thought this would be. But if you want to hear the voice of reason on all of this, go to his social media site and look at what John Fetterman said about this action.
I have not read that.
You need to check it out. He's got a video up and all that. I didn't have time to pull it down because it just came out this morning, and I heard him live on a show when I was coming in. John Fetterman is probably the best voice of reason and sensibility in America right now. I can't believe I'm saying that, but it seems to be true.
I'm definitely going to have to go on there. Maybe we'll talk about that on Friday. You know, he's a politician that's really surprised a lot of people. We thought he was just far out left, liberal, progressive, and he is, like you said, the voice of reason. And I read something last week, and it was about Hunter Biden. He goes, I'm not even sure I'm a Democrat anymore, you know, and so he's even having doubts. So maybe John Fetterman inspired him. We can only think maybe, you know, he'll be running for president.
Yeah, and I got to tell you,
Fetterman, not Biden.
Yeah, the last person I really want to hear from is somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene. And I got to tell you, I used to be a fan of hers to a certain extent, but what really ticked me off is not her criticism of President Trump, because I've criticized him as well, but her just going on The View and on MSNBC now, when they literally called her a clown show, and now she just is like, accepted by all that. It's total nonsense. So I say listen to Fetterman, disregard her.
I really would. I would, because, you know, you heard me talk about politicians. You have politicians. There's two types. There's the one that goes in there because they have nothing else to do. They want something to do. They think it's a good gig. It's an easy gig. They're going to get the accolades, and they're told what to do, and they follow party lines. And they stay in there. The only time they leave is when you take them out in a pine box. Then you have the other politician that is in there for personal gain. And I think Marjorie Taylor Greene, I hate to say that, but she goes in there, and she doesn't even have the character to finish out her term. You know, she's leaving early because it got uncomfortable and it was an unfavorable environment, and she got death threats. Well, you know, I still get death threats. And so she is a politician that went in there for the wrong reason, and they worry more about their next election or their next gig, whereas a statesman worries more about their next generations. And we've got too many of those, I was going to say a bad word, too many of those politicians in D.C., vote them out, throw them out. They don't deserve to be there. And if they don't have the brass to stay there for their 2-year elected term, don't ever let them get back in. And she needs to be on The View because that's where she belongs.
Absolutely. Well,
and not as a voice of reason.
All right. Well, that's going to do
now
it.
You got me going.
I hear you. Well, I'm going to give you one more quick shot, Ted, because we're going to close out. Take us out, sir.
No, let's all keep in mind we're Americans and we need a strong country, and we need to stand behind the president as this sorts out, as we get more information, then make your decision. But right now, let's embrace what happened and hope the Venezuelan people reclaim their country in a stance of liberty and freedoms.
Absolutely. Peace out, everybody.
See y'all later.